Hello, and welcome to the third episode of Creator Spotlight Season 2 from The Interface. Creator Spotlight is our new series where we talk to creators about what they make and do and how they got started. Today I'm joined by Laura Young, who's a climate activist and is probably best known for her work on banning disposable vapes. So welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, not a problem. So if people don't know much about you, what's your main what's the main thing that you're known for? So I've mentioned about the vapes, but what's the main thing?
Yeah, so I guess I'm an environmental campaigner is the easiest way to describe what I do. So for the last few years, I've campaigned about a variety of issues, but I exist online on the world of social media as Less Waste Laura. Waste as in what you put in your bin. Don't come to me for fitness tips. I don't have many of those, but kind of campaign around plastic waste, climate change, and spend my time. I mean, just now it's on disposable vapes, but over the years it's been many different issues trying to, kind of raise awareness and hopefully make some good change.
Yeah, it's really good. There's a lot of things that need to be done in that area. And there's a lot of misinformation and different things. It's just a whole cluster. So, yeah. So I found you on Twitter when you sharing that. I think it went pretty viral in the end. I think you're walking around where you live. I think it's in Dundee.
Yep.
Sort of picking up disposable vapes and thinking, and sort of making the point: this is just stupid. Why do they exist, and why do people just keep throwing them away? So I look on your website as well. You've been around. You've been around, like you. Well, it's a weird word to use, but you know what I mean.
In the best way.
There's a lot of media appearances on BBC News and Sky, and it's quite impressive the amount of places that you've been on already to talk about what you're campaigning against. This is really impressive. What's that been like, sort of, in the mainstream media?
Yeah, do you know, it's really interesting. So, I mean, we're having this conversation in February 2023, in case anyone's listening, in months to come. But so about 6 months ago, 6 months
Yeah.
ago, I was on a walk with my dog and came across a disposable vape. So this plastic, colourful item that was in the park when I was on a walk. And I'm a bit of a litter picker. So anyway, I just picked it up and was like, ugh, rubbish, whatever, threw it away. Didn't really think anything of it, just thought it's another piece of litter. And ever since then, I've just been seeing them everywhere. Different brands, different styles. Some of them are in their full form. Some of them have been squished. There's batteries hanging out of them. Anyway, so about at the time where this was all happening, I kind of discovered what they were and thought, oh my goodness, we are selling single-use disposable electronic devices. Like, what is going on?
Mm.
So I went online and was like, there must be somebody talking about this. There must be a campaign. There must be a petition I can sign. There must be an organization who's trying to do something about not just the litter, but the waste and the kind of ridiculousness that is these issues. And I came across nothing. No one was talking about it. No organizations were campaigning. And so it sort of leaves you with this decision of like, oh, well, maybe I'll just be the person who starts talking about it. So I think the reason there's been so much media is because this problem has come out of nowhere. Nobody else has been talking about it. And although now, 6 months on, we've got loads of engagement, we've got loads of political action, and I've been able to get loads of organizations behind me, I guess I'm still the face of it. And that's just because I was just the first one to really raise awareness. But I mean, certainly it's been the easiest thing I've been able to talk about because it's so clear cut. You know, it's such a big problem, and banning these devices is definitely the way forward. And I think the media appearances show that, because I know that journalists are supposed to be balanced, but often they're just like, yeah, my goodness, this is such a huge issue. You know, you can't listen to all the points against them and then think that they're a good thing. So, but no, it's been exciting. And it's also been nice to have it national and local.
Mm.
So like the local paper in Dundee where I live is totally taking this campaign on. But we've also had everything from, you know, BBC Radio 4, Investigations and Sky News and everything in between, which is really great. So just shows how important this issue is.
Yeah. What's the public? Has there been any? Usually, when there's something like this, it's, even though it shouldn't be controversial, not controversial, but it shouldn't have so much different sides on it. Has there been much reaction to you directly, or how has that been?
Honestly, it's been overwhelmingly positive. I mean, with anything, you get a few Twitter trolls, people who've got an opinion about it, but actually, 99.9% of general public, businesses, organizations, they're just in support because they just realize that, in a world where we're trying to go after a circular economy, net zero, be climate conscious, be resource conscious, selling a single use electronic device. Can you think of any other single use disposable electronic device? I can't, especially not one that people are throwing away daily, potentially.
Yeah.
So I think overwhelmingly people are in support. And the reason vaping was created was as a smoking cessation device. And that is still available in a reusable form from shops that will comply with the different regulations that they need to. It's still available for adults who are needing that as a medical intervention.
Yeah.
But what we don't need is 12-year-olds being able to pick these up in their school uniform from everything from corner shops to dessert shops to tanning salons, and in a way that is something that they just buy once, throw away, chuck away, don't really think much of, and cause really big environmental harm, not just as litter, but of course, batteries in landfill cause fires, batteries being run over by cars cause pop tires. There's so many issues. It's not just I was finding them as litter, it's everything else that goes along with that.
Yeah, it's good. There's always something that needs bringing up in any industry, I think, and this is quite important, especially as we're moving towards all the want to be more climate conscious. That sort of moves on to so it's one part of what the UK needs to do to combat climate change. What, in your opinion, what's the main thing we need to do to combat that?
I mean, it's a hard question because if there was a silver bullet, we would have used it by now. And I think that's always the frustration with climate campaigners. I think it's a little bit of everything. So we need people to wake up and want to choose active and public transport. The car should be the last resort for short miles, but for that we need affordable, accessible and reliable public transport. We also want people to come home from work or university or whatever they're doing to a house that's warm, but warm because it's got insulation, it's got double glazing, it's a good infrastructure, it's a good house, and we need councils to help people out with that. We need people to not fly multiple times a year. We need businesses to be divesting their banking and pensions. We need people to realise that they don't need new clothes every week, but can love secondhand fashion and can, mend the things that they have and get involved in community sharing networks of not just clothes, but kids' toys and tool libraries and all these different things.
Yeah.
And we need, a real overhaul of the waste that we have, both waste that you put in your bin and food waste and all these other things. And I think there's many policies that could address a lot of this stuff, but there's also a bit of a culture shift that we need to do. I think I've seen it with secondhand fashion. It's becoming a bit more acceptable. It's a bit kind of quirky now to go to a charity shop, but I think we need to do that with a lot more stuff. I remember someone said we need insulation and taking the bus to become sexy, and then we've solved the climate crisis. And I think that, so there's all these little things that we need to do, but ultimately it's a kind of societal shift and culture shift with policies that help us to kind of make us more sustainable in the round.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned sort of transport as well. So I saw you've done some, I can't remember what it was, a little while ago you did some work with VW.
Yep.
I think you went to America to help launch the ID Buzz or do something with the media with that. I guess your opinion on EVs is pretty positive, but what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, EV is great topic. So, I mean, I have an electric vehicle. I have an electric car, and that's because in 2019, my petrol car came to the end of its life, and I was faced with a job that I definitely needed my own car for at the time. And I was faced with getting another petrol car or putting my own money into the world of electric vehicles to try and invest that money and, kind of help bring the industry on. And I think electric cars are great. And I think they are definitely part of the sustainable transport future, but they are absolutely not in isolation. If everybody on the planet gets an electric car, that's not going to be very environmentally friendly. Actually, electric cars are part of the the sustainable future, alongside really good active travel routes, public transport options, and even things like car sharing networks, and I think for me, one of the things that I've been noticing a few families do, and I think this is something that could really be a great model, is families where they maybe had two cars that were petrol or diesel have now gone to one car that's electric, but really look at, how can we do other journeys, cycling, walking, public transport to kind of be part of that. And I think also with the rise of things like car sharing networks, often which have electric cars in them, it's about saying, okay, as an individual, do I need a car? Do I actually need to own one? Or do I just need access to one once in a while? So I think electric cars are great, especially because as soon as you're putting the energy into it, that energy is not going to be 100% fossil fuel generated. Lots of it's going to be renewable. But also there's nothing coming out the other end. It really helps with reducing air pollution, which is such a huge issue in many city centres. So, I mean, I've it's kind of funny, I'm brought onto all these different shows and podcasts and TV things to talk about electric cars. And I'm always the one who's like, I'm absolutely not an electric car nut, but I'm also here to talk about public transport, which often isn't that popular when people are trying to sell electric cars. But, I think it's the reality is that they are great and sustainable, but not if everyone has one sitting on their driveway, not being used 95% of the time or whatever the crazy statistic is for car use. So roundabout answer to say, yeah, I love them. I've got one, but I hope there is a day where I can give mine up and rely on public transport and car sharing networks instead.
Definitely. What is the public transport like in where you live?
So I mean, Dundee is. I'm from Glasgow, and Glasgow has an amazing train network. We also have a subway, so I was very much used to that as my kind of public transport routes. Dundee is very different. I mean, I live in what you could maybe call a 15-20 minute neighborhood. So I have my workplace, all of my shops, all of the kind of things that you would need every day within a 20-minute walk of my house. Green spaces, shops, businesses, everything, pubs, cafes, everything I could need is within a 20-minute walk. So I love that idea and that concept. And that's not something I've actually had before. And I use my bike when I'm in Dundee to go other places. But I think the public transport is not great, but it is there and you can make it work. But I think living in Dundee is a walkable city for me. But I also recognise I'm a young person who's kind of fit and able to do that. So, but I think I've also spent time living in Edinburgh, and the bus network there is amazing. So like buses is what you get everywhere. But if anyone's ever been to like London, you just get that public transport anywhere else is so bad compared to that. And I think that's always what we, want to be striving for. But it's okay, you make do. But I think particularly where public transport falls down is on the kind of longer journeys. Certainly, for price. I think there was one day where I went and had to go from Glasgow to Dundee. I had to get a return ticket. It was on peak. And at the time, I didn't have like a discount card. And it was going to be 50 quid. And I thought 50 quid for a 90-mile journey, like obviously I'm going to take my car because it's not 50 quid in petrol. So I think there's times where, we really need to incentivize people to use it more. And sometimes that's financial, sometimes it's with better routes. But it's okay. But I mean, in Dundee, I'm getting my 10,000 steps in easy.
That's good. Yes, definitely. It does depend on where you live, I think. If you just say to people, just use public transport, but people always find reasons why not because of where they live and that sort of thing. Especially where I live in the middle of the countryside, and there's the bus routes have dwindled over the last 10 years. So getting that sort of thing is pretty impossible where I live. So, but yeah, can definitely appreciate if you live in built up areas and things, you can. It's definitely a good option. So, yeah, that's good. What out of interest? What EV do you have?
I have a Renault Zoe. I have a love-hate relationship with it. And I mean, just to kind of paint the picture, when I first got it, there would be times in summer where you would be getting pretty much the 200 miles out of it in one charge. But in December of last year, I was stuck in Perth at a park and ride because I had to charge, because on a full charge, I got 90 miles. And when I regularly go between Glasgow and Dundee, which is 90 miles, that is just like absolutely not good enough because you need a bit more than 90 to have any sort of confidence that you're going to get there. So I have a love-hate relationship with it, but I also recognize that I'm an EV owner who doesn't have a charger at home. I live in a 10-minute flat. I can't put one in, I don't have a driveway. And so I am someone who relies on the public network, which is not great, especially when it is the thing you rely on. If you've got one at home, you've always got that as a backup. So I have a bit of a unique EV driving experience because I don't have a big fancy Tesla and a lovely house with a driveway where I can just pull in every evening and give it a charge. But I think that's part of the learning for the whole world. If we're going to be moving towards this, we need to see how it works for people like me who don't have that accessibility.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens with that. There's a lot of work being done with like chargers in lampposts and things that pop out the ground. So
I regularly get in touch with my council. I'm like, come on, if you could just put a charger right outside my front door, that would be brilliant.
Yeah, that's great. How have you done any other stuff? Like, I know I mentioned the ID Buzz you did with VW. Have you done have you done any other stuff with car companies, sort of in that sort of sense, or?
I mean, the ID Buzz was probably the biggest project that I've done, and I think that was the reason it sparked my interest is because, number one, VW is maybe the biggest car brand in the world in terms of so well known. They've got cars everywhere pretty much. And the fact that they're going electric with quite an iconic car, because obviously it's kind of based on the VW camper van, I was really intrigued as to what they were doing. But also it was the opportunity for me to go, and as part of that partnership, I got to interview the chief exec. And VW has a history of not being particularly transparent about carbon emissions, may I say. So I was interested in, this kind of big push that they were making towards electric. And, one of the things that their chief exec said, Scott, in our interview, was that Volkswagen are responsible for 1% of all global carbon emissions. 1% for one company across the world. That is massive when you think that the UK is 1% or whatever we are. That's huge. Oh my goodness. And so to me, that was a great opportunity to be able to talk about, actually your company has this huge impact globally, and what are you kind of, helping consumers do to reduce that? And so, that was a great opportunity, not just to say, here's a cool electric car and let's, people drive it, but actually to say, as a company. But, since then I've been doing, I've done some partnerships with Co-Wheels, which is obviously a kind of car sharing network. And within their network, they've got BMW i3s, and I got to kind of rent one or share one for the day and kind of show people how there's a different world out there for car ownership, which is, you can kind of share a car when you need it. And I've kind of been enjoying doing that as well, kind of talking about the different ways, because I'm also aware that the ID Buzz is ridiculously expensive for your average person. I certainly couldn't afford one, but that doesn't mean that you can't have a car experience or an electric car experience in that kind of way. So that's kind of some of the other stuff I've been doing.
That's really cool. It's great. Also, what many people might not know is you're also an actual scientist as well.
Yes.
It's probably not. I don't know if that's been talked about in other things you've appeared on. So you've actually, what sort of degree have you got? Because it's quite interesting to talk about where people come from. Because last guest I had on this last week, I think she had got a journalism degree, and it was quite interesting to talk about that and where she came from. So what sort of degree have you got?
So my background is I've got an undergraduate in geography and environmental science, and then I have a master's degree in environmental protection and management, and I am now currently a PhD researcher. I am halfway through my first year, so don't ask me anything too hard, but I'm looking at kind of nature-based solutions to climate change, but with a community engagement, community-centred angle on this. And it is from a funding group called the Scotland's Hydro Nation, which is a kind of Scottish government project, really trying to think about influencing planning and policy. So, right now I'm looking at how do we create spaces in our communities, in our cities, that help us become climate resilient, which is absolutely key when climate change is coming, but in a way that engages the community, gets them to take ownership of these projects, gets them involved, and brings multiple benefits, not just great because it's going to stop a flood, but actually it's biodiverse. It helps people get out in green space. It's, reducing air pollution. It's got all these different benefits. And how can we do that really well in an inclusive way? So that's kind of what I spend my time doing most, I was going to say 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Yeah, I'm sitting on a podcast in the middle of a Tuesday. But anyway, that's what I'm supposed to be doing with most of my time.
Yeah, that's really cool. Also, I noticed you've done some stuff for BBC Bitesize. So that's the BBC for people watching like abroad. It's sort of like a learning centre, isn't it? It's for I used that when I was at school. It's sort of like a video platform and a lot of learning experience. How did that come about?
Oh, how did it even come about? I'm actually trying to think. I think it was so they kind of follow the curriculum and try to create really engaging resources that aren't just textbook pages. And they contacted me because I'd done some work with a Scottish BBC kind of organization or arm of it called The Social, which is very much kind of younger people trying to create videos about random topics in Scotland to just share online. And I think they'd kind of come across me on that, or, it was sort of this through the grapevine had got my name, and they were looking to create pieces of content around sustainability bits of the curriculum. I think it was about recycling and waste, and you can imagine the topics. Yeah. So they asked me, would you be happy to kind of create a bit of script, a bit of content, and then if you're up for it, actually be in a video where we kind of film you just saying the lines. So it very much started as that, and then they kind of quite liked my presenting style, and also, kind of recognized that I've got the background to make sense of why I would be giving them. So I've done a couple of different projects with them, and I love it because, I think education is so key when it comes to creating a generation who are engaged in climate and environmental issues. And so, yeah, it was great to be able to get involved with them and also have a bit of fun. My gosh, doing stuff for young people is always fun. Doing stuff for adults is boring. So it's always nice to get into a project that's a bit more fun.
Yeah, definitely. Get some other bits on sort of as we talk about the need to sort of reduce waste and that sort of thing. If anyone who doesn't know much about that sort of thing, because I guess there's quite a lot of people who don't know a lot about how to reduce waste and that sort of thing. What's your advice on if someone just wants to start making a difference where they can?
Yeah, I think it would be, so what I did in 2018, when I started thinking about this, was I did a New Year's resolution. So my resolution for the year was to try and be more sustainable, whatever that meant. And obviously waste is a huge part of that. So I actually did something called a waste audit. And basically, because when I was starting out, I was just looking in all my cupboards, in all my drawers, and I was like, everything is covered in plastic. How am I supposed to get rid of all of this waste? It feels really overwhelming. And so what I did is I decided that for 2 weeks, I was just going to live normally, but collect all of my waste. So even if I was out and about, getting a coffee with friends or whatever it is, I would just keep all my waste, come home and kind of put it in the bin. But at the end of 2 weeks, I brought it out and put it in my kitchen, spread it all on the floor.
Yeah.
And was just looking at it and being what's actually there? What waste am I producing? And I sort of divided it up into categories and was thinking about how to tackle it. And one of the things I realized during that first waste audit of my life was that half of my waste, just by volume, was from lunches and coffees out. So I was a student at the time. I was getting meal deals. I was getting coffees all the time. And actually most of my waste was just coffee cups, takeaway boxes from sandwich shops, meal deal wrappers. And I thought, okay, well, instead of trying to just go plastic free with everything, for the first couple of weeks, let's just focus on this waste. So I got myself a reusable coffee cup. I remembered to take a lunch box so that if I was getting lunch out, I could just get it in that instead of a takeaway box. And I was just trying to be more mindful, okay, I maybe don't need a meal deal every day, but I can try and buy the ingredients for a meal deal and try and save some waste there. So within a few weeks, I'd halved my waste because I was just doing it in a kind of methodical way. And then, of course, you do it again and you find that there's other bits that you can then tackle. So instead of just trying to do it all at once, and I think that's the best way to go about it, because when I was having this conversation with my grandparents, I was like, oh yeah, I've got this reusable coffee cup. Says, I'm getting 3 coffees a day and it's great because I'm saving all this. And my grandparents were like, we've never bought a takeaway coffee. We're in our 80s. We can't walk and drink coffee at the same time. Are you mad? So it made me realize you know, if I'd bought them reusable coffee cups, that wouldn't have saved them any waste because that's not the waste that they were producing. But for them, there was, you know, different items. So for everyone, it'll be unique. Some people, it'll be, you know, toiletry waste, or it'll be a different type of kitchen waste, or it'll be something completely different.
Yeah.
And people can kind of work out, okay, well, maybe that's the swaps that I can make to just try and find a solution to like this one area. And that'll really help. And you can kind of keep just doing that and doing that and doing that until either you're completely zero waste. And if you are, well done, because that's impossible in my mind. Or you're just like, at least all the waste you're producing is like stuff that you just can't help, like stuff that is really unavoidable. And I think that's the best way to go about it.
Yeah, that's great. That's some good advice. It's definitely quite hard. Like, you can sort of mill through general day-to-day stuff and just not think about what you're doing, and it's definitely important. So, yeah. Just one final bit as well. I thought this was quite a good bit. So, anyone who's, I guess, in a similar position to you, like sort of got some sort of following behind them, what is there any sort of advice you've got for that? Because it can be quite daunting sometimes, I reckon. Is there any, like, dealing with like negative things, or just dealing with a little bit of the attention that you're getting? Is there any bits of advice on that?
Have a good group of friends who will laugh at screenshotted trolling, because that's my favorite thing to do. It's like anytime I get any issues, I'm always like screenshot it to my pals and we just have a laugh about it. I mean, I think for me, I treat social media as a sort of tool in my toolbox for the work that I do. And I treat it very much like my emails. So, I mean, I'm sure there are some email junkies out there, but I don't sit on my emails and like refresh them and spend time going over and over and over emails people have sent me, and, you know, spend my time like flicking through it. You know, you go in your emails to answer people who have got in touch, and then you go off it and you go about your day. And I think when it comes to social media, you've got to do the same. So there's been times in my life where I've been really busy and very much do like 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening. And I just like completely segment it off in my life and say, I will deal with all my social media then, look at all the notifications, answer any, whatever might be there, and then leave it. Obviously, there's times I've got more free time and can spend more time being more creative or whatever it might be. But I think that's what I find helpful, especially because there is times where maybe I'm the face of, you know, some media stuff around different issues, and there's a lot of heat in the conversations, or people aren't happy with it. There's no point in sitting sweating over what people are saying. And most of the time it's anonymous people anyway. So I'm just like, who knows? They wouldn't say it to my face. But I think you just spend time away from it, because I think, you know, social media is so great for work that I do and work that other people do, but you have to manage it well. And just have people that can hold you accountable to that. So, you know, people who are like, you know, are you doing all right? Like, are you managing it? Or people who can call you out and be like, what are you doing tweeting all that nonsense? Like, get that down. You know, I think that's helpful to have that. And so if anyone's work is increasingly, you know, ending up on social media and that's where you spend your time, just manage it like anything else. And for me as well, just like as a kind of final tip, I actually have separate personal accounts. I keep my work completely separate. And that's because, you know, I want to be able to scroll through Instagram and see my friends and not be worrying about kind of my work related topics. And so like that for me was a decision I made very early on, but I mean, it helps me kind of segment what is work and what is just scrolling through TikTok for the pleasure.
Thank you for coming on the Creator Spotlight, Laura. It's been good to have you on the show to talk about the climate and everything else that you do. If people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
You can find me on all social medias under Less Waste Laura.
Awesome. Yeah, you can find the interface at theinterface.uk, and then we're also on Twitter at _interface_. That's a bit of a mouthful. But yeah, thank you for coming on the show. Good to have you on.
Thanks for having me.